Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined here tonight in the studio by Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure, sir. Your Excellency, now, when we're talking about the developments in Gaza, and we've been following the developments for months now. Now, first off, Egypt has hosted a Sunday joint summit between European leaders, and they all reiterated their rejection of any sort of operation taking place in Rafah. Now, Rafah hosts about 200,000 residents now. It's about 1.5 million. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted and announced that the ground operation in Rafah is still very much on the table, and it will be taking place quite soon. What does it really mean having all the European leaders and all international world leaders and heads of states saying that, no, we are against this operation, yet the Israeli Prime Minister is insisting on having this operation take place? How serious should we take the leaders' rejection of such an operation, and how much influence does it have on the situation on the ground?
Well, as you just said it, I mean, it's embedded in your question, actually, very lightly. That's how we should take the rejection of the European leaders and the European Union as an organization. At the end, we have to once again check the acts of the European Union and its various countries. We have to check the position of each country individually. And so far, we haven't heard about any arm embargo, for instance, or any boycotting of Israeli products, or any economic sanctions, or I mean, we have an example in front of us when the Europeans want to really seriously do something, which is what they have done to Russia, because it's invading Ukraine, a sovereign country. All right, maybe Palestine is not yet the sovereign country, but it is a state, and it has a statehood that many of them are recognizing, but at the end of the day, their acts are totally different from what they say. And this is exactly the position of the United States. We've heard from President Biden several times that he is in favor of a two-state solution, and that he is working with his government and the American administration in order to implement the two-state solution. But at the end of the day, we just got reports saying that over 35 tons of ammunition and weaponry have been dispatched to Israel since the beginning of the war. We are talking about 300 ships, yes, and a similar number of airplanes and, I mean, air drops, but serious airdrops about arms and ammunition and so on for the Israelis. So actually nothing has changed. I mean, if we are talking practically speaking, nothing has changed from the positions of the United States or the Europeans. Yes, they have good intentions. We thank them for that. But, I mean, and then what? I mean, is it just to express your concern? Is it just to express your solidarity with the Palestinian people? Is it just to speak about how awful it is that over 30,000 persons lost their life, mainly women and children? And then what? I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic here, but actually we've been listening to these words and promises from the beginning of the war, 7th of October, and even before that. But then the actions speak for themselves. There is a full diplomatic support, military support, and covering up for Israel acts of crime and crime of wars and genocide. And actually, I can say to the clear conscience that the Europeans, as well as the Americans, are accomplices with Israel in committing those war crimes. So I don't want to stop really too much about the seriousness of the rejection of the Rafah invasion, which actually will direct us to the second part of your question, which is Why Israel is still doing that? Because it knows that nobody will seriously stop it from doing what it wants to do and what it has vowed and promised to do from the beginning of this war, which is, as we have seen, carpet bombing Gaza to the point that over 70% of its houses and civilian facilities have been destroyed, and the destruction of Hamas, which is not the main problem for me, because if Hamas doesn't exist, or even if they totally dismantle Hamas, there will be other resistance movements, simply because there is still going to stay to have the occupation. So accordingly, there will be other movements of resistance, and they will be armed as well, as much as they can, with their local capacity and capabilities, and they will continue waging a war on Israelis, simply because they are under occupation and they have the right, under any kind of UN charters or even human rights, they have the right to defend themselves and to self-determination. So they will continue doing that. So we are going to enter the vicious circle that Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to enter us, even though that the United States is trying now to prepare a new figure on the scene, which is Gantz, which is the head of the opposition. But until this moment comes, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is going to continue with the war crime, because this is the only way to stay in power, according to many sources, mainly Israeli sources. He lost his credibility, and this is his only way to stay in power until, and so he wouldn't have even to face trial for corruption allegation, as we all know.
Yes. Well, Mr. Ambassador, during that summit, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen really emphasized the importance of the European partnership with Egypt, really talking about their interests, the common interests with Egypt, and also the Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis reiterated that how the security and sovereignty of Egypt is quite integral for the whole region. So let's imagine the worst case scenario and the ground operation in Rafah actually does take place. Now, it will constitute a clear and present danger, or a direct effect on Egypt's national security. With all these statements by European leaders talking about the safety and security of Egypt, do we have some sort of international backing by the international community and world leaders in order to react or have some sort of a swift reaction to any dangers that a ground operation, an Israeli ground operation on Rafah might constitute?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, I believe that over 90% of the responsibility of protecting our borders is going to be in the hands of the Egyptian army and the Egyptian people as well. Although the good intentions, as I mentioned it before, but I mean, we've seen it already, that they're incapable of forcing Israel to comply with the international law. I mean, there is no doubt in any sane mind in the whole world that what Israel is committing right now is a war crime. And yet nobody is able until this moment to force Israel to comply. And accordingly, I don't see that if this invasion will take place, and what we are seeing right now shows that to a certain point it might very well take place. We've even seen a shift from the American position, from the total rejection to another different type of rejection, that Israel should not go inside Gaza, inside Rafah, without humanitarian aid, as if this is the only problem or the only obstacle to the ground operation. But and this shows too that the United States, to a certain extent, have retreat in its position, and this puts a lot of pressure on Egypt for two reasons. First of all, our national security. We have always to remember, of course, the Palestinians are our brothers and sisters, and we totally, heart to heart, we are with them in this. But at the same time, we have to think about our national security. No foreigner should enter Egypt without our consent and without our approval, which is not the case. And the second thing is that we know that once Israel will push them and will try to secure the borders from that point, they will never enter back, just like they did in 48 and in more than half a dozen of wars in between. All the Palestinians who fled their lands, or even the Arabs, because we have the same problem with Syrians, with some areas in Lebanon and in Jordan as well, and all these, I mean, they never came back. So this is the plan. And they didn't hide it, by the way. And this is the best thing about the Israeli politics, that they don't hide it. I mean, they have very cruel intentions, and they don't hide it. They are not scared. And they know that they are above the law. And they know that no power on earth can force them, especially now. Their most sincere ally, which is the United States, are entering the election year in the United States. And we've seen this for so many decades. During the last year, no president is able to take any decision in order not to lose the votings. And this is something that is very important for them, which is the Jewish lobby and its pressure on any politician in the United States. I have known personally several politicians in the United States, whether we're talking about the Senate or the Congress, who, although they, I mean, deep down, they believe in the justice of our cause, but they cannot pronounce themselves on this simply because they know that if they will do that, AIPAC and other Jewish pressure lobbies are going to pay whatever it takes so they make sure that this congressman or this senator will not be re-elected once more. So nobody wants to risk their own political future. And according to that, they will continue the support of Israel, even if they don't want to. The situation is very, very ambiguous, and at the same time, it's very dangerous, because the United States is still one of, if not the most powerful military force on earth. So we have to understand this. But as you just mentioned, the idea of that there is a support from those countries is not really bearing any fruits until this moment. And we hope that at the last minute something is going to happen. The only leverage that we have on Israel is the hostages, and we are relying on this on the families of the hostages. And please, make no mistake, the hostages' family, they do not care about Gaza or about the people that are being killed. Actually, they want them even more than that, but after they get their own prisoners and their own hostages. This is their main concern. But as Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, have said it clearly, that most Israelis are in favor of the total destruction of Gaza. With civilians, without civilians, this is the reality of things. The Israelis are not against their government, they're just against the policy of the government, who is not able to break a deal with Hamas in order to get their hostages. But if there were no hostages in the situation, you will not find one Israeli. Well, we'll find maybe one or two. But you will not find even what you can call a minority of Israelis who are opposing the war on Gaza. This is the only thing that is keeping them, which is the hostages. Once the hostage situation is solved, and this is what Benjamin Netanyahu said, he wants a temporary ceasefire for the swap of hostages. But he never committed that he will stop his war action and his ground invasion of Rafah and the rest of Gaza and the reoccupation of Gaza, although the whole international community is against this idea, including us, of course. But he will do it, simply because nobody can deter him from doing it.
Then on what basis are people hopeful that there could be some sort of a change in terms of the leadership, the Israeli leadership, and maybe the US is prepping Gantz to take the lead on that? Then on what basis are people hopeful?
Well, people are hopeful for two things. First of all, the reception that Gantz had a few weeks ago, a few days ago actually, in the United States, that shows that America is treating him as the coming figure in the place, especially that whether it's Gantz or someone else, but it's definitely not going to be Netanyahu once again and his coalition. And that's what actually is pushing Netanyahu further to the extreme right with Smotrich and Ben Gvir. He doesn't have another option in order to keep this government from falling. So he is actually in a corner, and he has to rely more on those two extremists. He doesn't have another option. I'm not a fan of those two specifically, especially after they called, and they had the guts to call it publicly, to call the Palestinian human animals, which is something actually no politician have ever dared to say. But they do not mind saying that. Once again, why? Because nobody is going to take an action against them. And even if it's going to be a temporary thing, but it's going to be erased very soon. Unfortunately, the Israelis are having several pressure groups in, whether we are talking about Europe or we are talking about the United States. They are prepared for days like this. And although we have a just cause and the whole world is recognized the just cause, but we couldn't make them work to achieve that just cause and to reach the two-state solution, the only hope for a peaceful Middle East. And that's why President Sisi yesterday, while he was meeting with the European leaders and with the head of the European Commission, he mentioned several times security, because our security are in stake now. And we are in a certain danger. And we want to focus on our economic problems, on our development problems, on the votes that we have given our people in order to further develop our country towards better industry, better environment, better infrastructure, a better life for Egyptians. And we don't want anything to take our vision from those goals that we have set ourselves in order to achieve. We don't have the kind of support that Israel is having, a full refill of anything that is lost during its wars. No, we fight very hard to get, whether we're talking about arms, whether we are talking about diplomatic support, this and that. Israel is doing it the easy way. They destroy their arms, they get new arms. They don't have ammunition, they get ammunition. They have a full of ammunition and arms that doesn't end. So they will continue with this because, I mean, the situation have proven it. I mean, ever since this war erupted and all of the calls and the begging to Israel to stop the genocide, and Israel does not want to stop it. Yes. So what I'm talking about is not just a hope. It's something that has been proven the last few months, ever since the 7th of October.
Yes.
So, excuse me if I'm not optimistic about a better tomorrow for the Palestinian, for the area, for the Israelis themselves, because of what I am seeing right now.
Well, let's try to entertain the idea of having a glimmer of hope. Now, before Ramadan, we were talking about mediation talks, talking about some sort of a ceasefire, prisoner and hostage exchange, and a ceasefire throughout Ramadan. But that failed. Israel didn't even send a delegation to the talks. However, there is an Israeli delegation heading to Qatar, headed by the Mossad chief. And they will be engaged in talks with Hamas representatives. Probably the US and Egypt as well will be present during these talks, still talking about having a 6-week truce, exchanging of hostages, about 40 of them. Now, having an Israeli delegation participating in this time around, headed by the Mossad chief, is this a much more willing or positive attitude from the Israeli side, or should we be more hopeful of this round of mediation talks?
Well, let's analyze it. Israel is having, and the government actually of Israel is having tremendous pressure from the families of hostages. And they're going to give them what they want. Some of the hostages, as we've heard, mainly women, even in the one working with the IDF or in the IDF, and the elderly and the sick and those who needs medicine and so on. We are talking about a number between 40 to 50 hostages. And in revenge, they are going to release a number. Hamas, according to Hamas, they want between 700 and 1,000 of Palestinian prisoners, including those who have been accused of murdering Israelis and so forth, and some, as we call it, big shots of names. Of course, not the biggest ones, but anyway, from the high rank of the Palestinian prisoners. This is one hand. What is going to change during this time? Well, we are going to have some more humanitarian aid. Of course, Israel will not be generous about it, just to keep them alive, but not too much fed. And at the same time, we are going to buy ourselves 6 weeks of truce. During this, Israel is going to re-prepare itself for the invasion because it's surrounding Rafah. So from one side there is Egypt, on the other side there is the Mediterranean, the third side there is Israel. So the Palestinian, the 1.5 that you mentioned, 1.5 million Palestinians, will be in this situation, this enclave of Rafah, until further notice, when the war will resume.
Yes.
The only hope, to give you that glimpse of hope that you are asking for, is that during this time there will be serious negotiations about a long-term ceasefire or even a total retreat of the Israeli forces, which they will not accept, unfortunately. Why they will not accept? Because they want to continue the war, or the goals that they have set from the beginning of the war will not be achieved, which is the total freedom of all the hostages, the live one, and the second thing, the total destruction of Hamas. If they do not do that, they lost, and they cannot afford losing in front of their own people. That's why they kept this war going for all this time, because we are very close from achieving victory. What's left is Rafah. That's according to Israeli politicians. So I don't see that the situation will change much, because the Palestinian will not get the right to go back to their homes in the northern part and the middle part of Gaza. They will stay in this enclave during the 6 weeks. They will be better fed to be prepared for the next battle that will finish them off from the face of the earth, unfortunately, according to Israeli calculations and analysis. So why should I get this glimpse of hope? Simply because I believe in humanity, but this is not enough when you're talking about Israelis and what we've seen them doing the last 5 or 6 months.
Ambassador Meligy, now, what about the other side, the Palestinian Authority? Now, they've appointed Mohammed Mustafa as the new prime minister, who's a banker, really, an economist and he worked with the World Bank, was head of the Palestinian Investment Fund. Now, how can this change anything within the political game? Does he add something that is different as opposed to his predecessor? Do you feel that he will achieve, maybe with his relations with, with his experience working with the World Bank, can he pull some international strings to have maybe a better hand at negotiations? Do you expect any difference?
Well, I mean, what we've seen so far is that no Palestinian leader or authority can achieve more than what Israel is accepting to give. It is not about negotiations between two equals, unfortunately. And that's why, even with very good cadre from the Palestinian Authority, even getting help from some of their very prominent personalities worldwide, Israel will only accept that it will do what it can accept according to its own security rules and its own regulations. Israel wants a Palestinian Authority that helps it with implementing the security measures that Israel wants to see for itself. This is the only need of a Palestinian Authority according to Israeli point of view. And since they are still occupying the West Bank, and since they are still annexing more of the land and water resources of the West Bank, and still they can still call to build more and more colonies and settlements, that means we don't have a serious counterpart to talk to, because they can do it. Why are they doing this? Because they can. When this war started, everybody was talking about that the Palestinian invaded the areas of Israelis. Good. Can you please define where are the Israeli borders that the Palestinians have invaded them? Israel, until today, never accepted, still refuses, in its own constitution, still refuses to recognize or to even declare what its borders are. This is the only country in the world who does that, and yet it is getting a full diplomatic relation with most countries of the world, and it's enjoying a status just like any other sovereign country, although it doesn't want to declare where its borders. This is actually an absurdity, and it's a joke to the international community. But yet it's working. Why should they? Because they don't know when they will stop. They will stop where the last Israeli military can reach. This is exactly what they are doing, and this is what they've been accomplishing so far. That's why they are enabled to annex more and more lands, and then once they've had enough, that's when they are going to declare that this is going to be our land from here to there. But I don't think that this is going to happen anytime soon, because they believe that they can still do. I mean, they have agreed for land, for water resources, for everything that is not theirs, as much as they could take, and they are taking it, and they are enjoying taking it. And we are talking about settlements, and we are talking about illegal settlements, as if they are legal settlements. And the narrative of Israel has been the one dominant in the international media and with international community, the safety of Israel. Tell me about one leader who came, whether European or American, who came and spoke about Palestinian prisoners. None. They are all talking about Israeli hostages, starting from the Secretary General of the United Nations all the way down. Everybody is talking about the freedom of and how to free the Israeli prisons. How about the thousands that are in the Israeli dungeons? No, nobody's talking about them, except that we need some of them for the swap, which can happen today and tomorrow. They can again, the Israelis can take them again. And actually, there are several reports that they have taken so much of Palestinians in the last few months in order to prepare them for the swap, so that they wouldn't have to give from the old prisoners. The idea is very absurd, and the international community, I mean, I think that according to the Israelis, they're becoming a livestock for the Israelis, because they know that, I mean, they're repeating the narrative of Israel without even stopping to think about it for a few seconds, that how serious it is. Unfortunately, this is the situation how it is.
Yes. And the Egyptian UN representative in Geneva has stated how serious and a catastrophic situation that people are facing in Gaza, especially the women, children and girls as well. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back. Permanent representative of Egypt to the UN in Geneva, Ahmed Iheb said the catastrophic situation faced by women and girls in the Gaza Strip is a stain on the conscience of humanity and requires immediate intervention from international institutions. Ambassador Gemereddin was speaking on behalf of 125 countries during the 55th session of the UN Human Rights Council on the situation of women and girls in the occupied Palestinian territories. According to a statement by the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he expressed solidarity with Palestinian women and girls in the current struggle, spotlighting the unbearable suffering they are enduring under the Israeli war. Since the start of the Israeli attacks on October 7th, more than 1 million women and girls have been displaced in Gaza several times. Iheb Gemereddin also pointed out that 70% of Palestinians who have been killed in the war are women and children. He stressed that Palestinian women and girls, including pregnant and lactating mothers, are suffering malnutrition, while the entire population is at imminent risk of famine. Ambassador Gemereddin said that Palestinian women are not only struggling to survive the bombing launched by Israeli forces, they also have to face special struggles trying to take care of their health, another level of suffering. HRC monitors were appalled by human rights violations against Palestinian women and girls. They highlighted reports of deliberate targeting and extrajudicial killing of Palestinian women and children in places where they sought refuge, all while fleeing, as well as the chilling reports of sexual assault and rape in places of detention. The Egyptian representative underscored the warning issued by the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women that the principles of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women face challenges in Gaza. He called on the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to collect evidence to help conduct an independent, rapid, and comprehensive investigation into these violations and crimes. A host of countries that pride themselves on being active participants in gender-related issues and promoting women's rights within the Human Rights Council did not endorse this statement. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Ambassador Meligy. Your Excellency, now, it is a stain on humanity, really, what's taking place there. People are dying by the day out of starvation, not malnutrition anymore. It's basics, starvation. Children under 4 are already dying. Women and girls are being sexually assaulted and raped. Yet everyone's reiterating the necessity of having humanitarian aid being delivered to the Gaza Strip. So when does humanity or world leaders actually draw the line? How can we expect, or when can we expect some sort of proper action taking place to end this suffering?
Well, according to the declarations and the statements made by several European and President Biden himself, anytime. Mm-hmm. But according to the action and what we've seen happening so far, not anytime soon, unfortunately. There are several aspects to your question, actually. The first one is about who is going to distribute this if we reach even a temporary ceasefire or a truce. It's going to be UNRWA. And UNRWA is destructed. Mm-hmm. And many of its offices have been totally destroyed.
Yes.
And if you allow me here between brackets, I want to add something. Maybe this is one of the rare points that I have to point at that I do agree with Israel about, which is that we have to abolish the work of UNRWA. Why is that? Because what we have seen so far, UNRWA was actually created to meet the Palestinian demands. So if you want to stop the Palestinians from receiving what they should have, you just stop UNRWA and nobody else will be affected. And that's why I agree with the Israelis. The UNRWA has to stop, and the Palestinian refugees have to be dealt with the UNHCR, just like any other refugee in the world, mm-hmm. with the UNHCR, which Israel cannot stop. And you know why? Israel have objected and opt out from the possibility of Palestinian to be able to seek refuge with the UNHCR, simply because if they would do so, they then, one of the things that the UNHCR will help them to get back is the right of return, which is something Israel doesn't want. That's why they created the UNRWA, in order to tailor the Palestinian demand in a way that does not bother Israel or does not interfere with Israel's plans, mm-hmm. to annex more land and to refuse the right of the Palestinians to return to their homes. And in this concept, the UNRWA was created. So I totally agree. It should be dismantled, and the Palestinians should be dealt with the UNHCR just like any other refugees, including the right of return. That's one thing. Second, the world is totally blind on what is happening to the employees of UNRWA. We are talking about 200 now
Yes.
of the employees of UNRWA that has been killed, while it took only accusation to 8 of them to halt and to suspend the funding from several European countries and America and Japan and Canada to stop totally funding this very important organization for the safety and the ability of the Palestinian people to survive the wars and the crimes that have been committed against them. And in this, we see once again the world turning a blind eye towards what's happening to this organization that is the only organization capable of distributing any humanitarian aid that will be provided to the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
This is one thing. The second thing is that Israel wants to put as much obstacles as it can to prevent the aid from entering easily to the Palestinians. We started with airdrops,
Mm-hmm.
which are giving the minimal of the minimum to the Palestinian, because first of all the cost is very high and the capacity of airplanes is very little compared to a convoy of trucks that could enter from any crossing. And even the United States once again could not convince Israel to open any crossing, to the point that the United States itself, in order to send some humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, had to refuse also to the airdrops.
Well, there's a maritime corridor that opened recently, but still reports are complaining and are stating that there are problems transferring the aid into actually the Gaza enclave.
And why did Israel accept this? Because it's going to take time and more time. And that's why people are dying already from starvation. I mean, we've seen that. And Israel, as I said, they claim that they are trying to help. I mean, if you really want to help, just open any crossing. It will be much easier. The trucks are already waiting in Rafah, in the Egyptian side. Just open the border from your side so we can enter.
Yes.
But they do not do that. Why? Because they want to make it as complicated, as much as complicated as possible, so that the Palestinian cannot receive the aid, and they continue starvation. How can they even not just fight back, resist anything that is going to happen to them from the Israeli soldiers with their full gear, very well fed, very well trained, in front of people who are facing starvation? What do you expect in the outcome of something like that? And this is what Israel is doing. Assures this point that it's going to go with the terrestrial invasion of Rafah. They are weakening the Palestinians as much as they can to make their mission easier when they will enter Rafah. It's quite obvious, because this is going to be, it will need infantry, it will need land forces, and those they cannot enter if they have real resistance in front of us, because as you know, Israeli human lives are very dear to the whole world. As for Palestinians, this is another issue. So this is the scenario that Israel is adopting and applying, and in front of the whole world and under its eyes, and nobody is doing anything to prevent it, unfortunately. And this is the catastrophe that we're living in today.
Well, is there anything, I mean, you've mentioned before that the Palestinian Prime Minister, Mohammed Mustafa, won't really be, I mean, we can't really be so hopeful or optimistic, because, as you've mentioned, it would only, he would only achieve as much as Israel allows him to achieve.
Exactly.
But are we talking about even some sort of ending any sort of division within the Palestinian Authority? I mean, any division between the West Bank and Gaza? Or do you feel that this conflict has already eliminated any sort of division between both sides, and they're both unified against the threat or the dangers that are imposed by the Israeli side already?
Exactly. I mean, I think that the two parties, or the several fractions of the Palestinian Authority on one side and the resistance movements, were never closer than they are today. I mean, this tragedy have united them in a way that was never before. They both understood that their split, their division, helped their enemy to more defy them and destruct them. And I think they are very close from reaching an agreement. And actually, we hear all the leaders of the Palestinian Authority defending not Hamas and its acts as much as they're defending the Palestinian people who are in Gaza, who are considered like another part. Israel wants to split them so that they can end one piece at a time and devour the whole Palestinian land. This is their hope and this is their dream. From the beginning they asked Egypt to take them, or Jordan, or any country that is ready to take them. Even the United States and Australia and many Western countries have offered that they can take few thousands of those Palestinians. At the end, we have to understand that the Israeli point of view, the Israeli plan is to try as much as it could to empty the land, or at least to make life impossible for Palestinians here or there.
Your Excellency, one last question because we only have 30 seconds. Now, what about Egypt? What can Egypt do now? What are the next steps? We've already worked on the humanitarian aid through the Rafah crossing, the airdrops with the army of the United Arab Emirates, participating in mediation talk, reiterating the Egyptian position.
Egypt has done everything in its power.
So what can we do?
And still doing, and they will still continue. But I want to refer to your last question that you mentioned about the Palestinian Authority. If we look at the picture of the negotiations that is taking place, we are hearing about Egyptians, we are hearing about Qataris, the United States and its intelligence services, and Israel, but we are not hearing anything from the Palestinian Authority, because it is not the power that is meant to, at this point, at least at this stage, to talk to the Israelis. We hope that at a certain point that we are going to resume peace talks, and then the role of the Palestinian Authority is going to be heard and seen. So far, Israel have actually put every possible hurdle on its way to be an active player in the game that is taking place. I hope that the next time we are going to meet here at this studio and this platform, we are going to be discussing new elements that are in the scene, and that the Palestinian lives are spared. So far, I'm sorry, but I don't see this happening unless some miracle is going to happen. And we hope that this miracle will come very soon, because the Palestinians are in dire strait, and we cannot wait. And as Egyptians, we cannot wait for more than that to take action, and we are going to do our utmost.
Well, miracles do happen every day, and hopefully the voice of reason, humanity, and logic really, and peace would be heard and would have a say within the situation taking place in the Gaza enclave. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, always a pleasure having you with us on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.